If there's one card that I literally never ask my friends to play, it's unfortunately our number 10 spot Vanilla Mode. The card certainly changes the game, but not in any fun way. The card states that under the rule set, monster effects cannot be activated and are negated. The only way around this is to play Ability Yell, which negates the card's effect, and I have to assume involves your monsters screaming so loud they break space-time just to allow you to play the game normally. And, since no one brought this up the last time this was mentioned in the video, this is the only reason to ever play Potential Yell. Yeah, the card that, quote, unleashes the power of a monster. It's to allow the monster to use its effects while Vanilla Mode is in play. But to get back to the format itself, it's what I and many others like to call Caveman Yu-Gi-Oh! The general idea of Caveman Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that you have a bigger number and therefore win, like a caveman having a sharper rock and not having to think about anything but just plain old beaten. You can play spell and trap focus decks just to avoid the negative repercussions that an infinite and ever-present skill drain implies, but you can also just play big dumb cards like Chainsaw Insect, which has a lot of attack and is therefore broken. The meta to counter that is playing Destiny Hero Defender, which has a lot of defense and is therefore broken. You can probably predict the entire meta based solely on a flowchart of what beats the last thing you put on the flowchart, mash up the latest entries on said flowchart, and then calling it a day. If this were a format, it would be horribly samey, just like how no one plays one life point duels often because the meta is stale and just forgotten about. This format is so unfun that the card itself has an off button so you can actually get to play the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! That is how little faith the writers had that people would keep reading the manga if this were the only thing it consisted of. Solid unfun out of 10. Would not play this unless it was for a stream or someone held my family at gunpoint. Of the two, I prefer the stream. Next up is a card that only beats Vanilla Mode because this isn't a slog to actually go through, even though it's more of an added rule than an additional format. Number 9 has to go to Destiny Draw. Destiny Draw sounds absolutely ludicrous as a card, but fun as a rule, and that's what makes these so fun to play. The idea is that you not only have to have your opponent's life points double yours, you also need to have no monsters while your opponent controls at least one. You are then able to top deck one of 5 cards that you chose at the beginning of the duel, if any are still in your deck, and you are able to draw it during your draw phase. You can only do this once per duel. Okay, so the idea here is that you want to add in generic comeback cards, or something limited on the ban list to ensure that you have it when you need it the most, like Raigeki, Monster Reborn, etc. It doesn't change the game much, it does nothing at all if your opponent or you decide to win before a draw phase comes up where it can be used, but it's a neat nod to anime fun that we all like to see only when we're doing it. Not much else to say, as the card is just the game you play now, but with an added risk of hoping that you knew what you needed at the beginning of the game, for whatever circumstance you could be in now, as, keep in mind, it is still random between the 5 cards you pick. Fun addition, may be added into some other cards on this list, because yes, you can do that. I just won't cover that for the rest of the list because I feel like that's just too much to comprehend, like playing Monopoly with every house rule ever conceived by man. Now we're getting into the fun cards! Number 8 is one we should all be familiar with, but we may need the card to refresh us up on everything it entails. 5D's main addition to this list, the idea of card games on motorcycles itself, Speed Duel! Speed Duel actually goes back to the anime ideology with both players starting at 4,000 life points, making it have quick and snappy games compared to the real-life game. It also just straight up goes Duel Links with the clause that you return your hand to the deck and remove cards until you have anywhere between 20 and 30 cards, preferably going to 20 just because that's what you do in these games. This is doubled down from the fact that you remove cards from your extra deck until you have 5 or less left, which is funny because Duel Links just added a 6th slot to the extra deck as a quest reward, so it's literally more expansive than this format so far. You draw 1 less card for your opening hand, and you have 2 less monster and back row slots to work with, ending off with skipping main phase 2 as a concept entire— Wait a minute. This is literally just Duel Links! This has nothing to do with card games on motorcycles! Damn, I wanted to win by technicality via vehicular manslaughter, and now you're telling me I can play Duel Links on my computer and it isn't sanctioned by Konami and I have every card unlocked from the get-go with cards that Duel Links would never include in a million years? Actually, that sounds pretty fun. This is the only format on the list that actually has a pragmatic use attached to it. That being that you can build a deck for Duel Links that you're thinking about investing in, but aren't sure would be good. Kind of like what Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro does for the real game, and that's super neat. If you don't want to spend real money for the Neos or Ancient Gear structure decks and just want to see if they would even be worth it, this is straight up the card for you. The only downside to this idea, however, is that it does not include an often integral part of what makes Duel Links special or uniquely fun. The skills. You can't play Zane and summon 3 Proto-Cyber Dragons, nor can you play as Weevil and swarm the opponent's deck with Parasites. I would consider this a good way to see what a deck is capable of, not what your deck in Duel Links is capable of, considering you usually start with a skill and build up, or at least have the option to go for the skill that beats down more just to beat over tricky monsters. As a format just to play though, it has a whole host of issues. First of all, Exodia exists in a 20-card deck. That is silly. Secondly, with half of your life points, you can still pull off degenerate FTK strategies that will make your opponent wonder what even happened. This one is fun in a gimmicky sort of way, not one that you would make decks for in real life to play with buddies or even want to play more than a couple times in one day and then forget about online. There isn't much variation in how you win here, so it's much more gimmicky than formats literally based around a central gimmick. Play this one at your own risk. I may not be the Surgeon General, but I can tell you that this will give you some kind of cancer. Maybe you can call me unfair for putting this card a couple placements above Destiny Draw, but there's a good reason. Command Duel is a card that you can play 3 of, and the rules stack, so that's a pretty big plus. In addition, it doesn't change the game as much as it just adds random crap happening every turn during the draw phase, once for every Command Duel in play. What would be these crazy new additions, you may ask? Well, here are some examples. Both players can special summon 1 monster from their deck or extra deck that has "This card cannot be used in a duel" written on it. Just a note to everyone that in this format, Legendary Magician of Dark, Legendary Dragon of White, Creator of Hope, Winning Formula, and Creator of Miracles can be used during these duels, giving them an actual use and making things a lot spicier. Other commands include adding cards from your deck to your hand and letting your opponent do the same, Dark Roll dealings in the form of a rule, adding the top card of your graveyard to your hand, changing stat values of monsters based on their attribute. Then we get into some straight up crazy ideas. Play Rock, Paper, Scissors for 2,000 life points, or maybe to draw a card. Or, my personal favorites, gain 800 life points for wearing glasses, and change all the levels of your monsters if you are wearing a belt. This is even a game style that's played on Yu-Gi-Oh! Day in some local game stores, which is great because any excuse to support your local game store is a good one in my book. These rules, or rather additions, are so wacky and fun that you just kind of have to laugh along and not feel bad if you lose, as it's just dumb enjoyment. There's even an option to play with 2 slots reserved for write-in cards, so your game shop owner, or you if you own these cards or make them yourself, can make anything you want come to life. This is one that you don't have to build a deck around, but you can play at any time, and have a good laugh and make your friends maybe even want to play Yu-Gi-Oh! For the first time. Get some new people into the community, tell them it's meta to wear a belt and glasses, making Steve Urkel the king of games. That's just straight up the funniest thing to me. A format that specifically makes Steve Urkel have an advantage over the average person. That just makes this number 1 on its own if it was more of a format than an addition, so I'm keeping it held back just to seem fair. Just know that this dueling format is probably the most fun to just slam in and play, even at 3 copies. This one goes out to everyone that told me that in my Yugi cheating video, the Duelist Kingdom didn't have concrete rules, and therefore there is no such thing as cheating. Boom! We got rules right here! Because Duelist Kingdom is a format ranking it at number 6 on our list for today. Duelist Kingdom states that neither player can attack directly, and both players can change the battle position of their monsters after summon, effectively just making summoning and face-up defense position a thing you can do. You can also normal summon without tributing, allowing you to normal summon Blue Eyes on your first turn and relive the days of elementary school where you really had no idea how to play the game, but you had fun anyway. Lastly, if a monster is destroyed by a card effect, the controller of said destroyed monster takes damage equal to half of the monster's attack on the field. Strangely, nothing about setting life points to 2,000 to start, or saying whatever you want as your card effects. So just keep that in mind if you ever want to say your Great Moth is based on time, or you confuse Mammoth Graveyard with your opponent's monsters to make some ungodly mess that can't function as a living being. This one is, weird to say the least. If you can't attack directly, your main source of damage is either attacking opponent's monsters, or trying to stall to play Raigeki for game, which is a phrase I hope I never have to say in my life ever again. You kinda have to honor ban a few things if you want to play Duelist Kingdom, mainly just being lame and never summoning monsters. If you can do that, you can have a fun time, but without it, it's primarily just a way to see who likes playing the game of who can do the least things, and seeing that it's the player that wins first and therefore wins the deck out race. Fun times. Hope you're looking very intensely at an orange juice can, 'cause it's time to concentrate! Yes, I stole a "you might be a redneck Jeff Foxworthy" joke, but hey, it's a nice way to transition into Concentration Duel. Concentration Duel feels like something that makes a lot more sense when dealing with actual cards, but bear with me here because we'll probably be playing this card online more than real life anyhow. You start by returning every card in both hands into the deck, and both players never get a draw phase for the rest of the game. If that sounds ridiculous, it is, and it gets crazier. Once per turn, in each way, you can declare a spot in your deck from 1 to 40, and these are starting at the top, and call it. Once per turn, you can call a monster, and once per turn, you can say a spell or a trap. If you call it right, and the summoning or activation requirements are able to be fulfilled by the current game state, you complete the action of summoning or activating. For example, if I call 2 and say it's a monster, I would look at the second card from the top of my deck, and if it is a monster, say Breaker the Magical Warrior, I get to summon it, and it is considered a normal summon because I called monster and it was a monster that I could summon. I would not be able to do this if I had no monsters on the field and it was a Blue Eyes White Dragon, for example. If I call 2 again and say spell or trap, because the order of the deck is made different, through the fact that I removed a card and every card under it is given a new number value to represent it, a la 3 from before I used 2 is now 2, 4 is now 3, 5 is now 4, etc. I now have a chance to actually set or activate that card if I called it right. If that sounds complicated, it kind of is. Try it out for yourself on Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro, as I think I explained it the best I could without having any visual way of representing this. That's what happens when I am but a disembodied voice that only becomes material for my streams. Follow the stream, by the way. That transition was clean. Nice plug. Either way, this is a format that takes up a lot of deck building time to really play. One may say that a high IQ is necessary, so brush up on the Mick and Rorty and start maining Pac-Man in Smash Ultimate. Cards that require a hand are miserable here, so Trade-In goes from a draw engine staple to a card that refuses to function most of the time. Concurrently, Upstart and Jar of Greed are straight up broke for giving you a draw, as this card only negates draw phases, not drawing in general. Getting a hand is one of the best plays you can go for, so go for that. In addition, general rules exist, like how it's better to run 3 of a card so that you can play it specifically more consistently, and how Paleos run the meta from being primarily traps. This format, among the uninitiated, just becomes whoever gets the first monster first kinda wins, but that doesn't have to be the fact of the matter. Running traps is ridiculous, as you can set them for later use or activate them during your opponent's turn with the effective concentration duel itself. Traps are meta, guys. They are literally the best card type you can run in this format. If this was the true card game, it would be called Trap Speed instead of Spell Speed. Battle Traps specifically are a great noob trap, as they may want to just play level 4 toolbox and spam out monsters every turn consistently just to play beatdown. The only problem with running one card type is that you only play half the game, never able to even fish for that spell or trap if you're running all monsters, for example. This is mildly offset by simply using the spell and trap check to see what monster is in that specific card position. And that's where I have to bring up a lifesaver for anyone wanting to try this out. Start from the bottom of the deck. If you do not, you will have to take out a pen and paper and constantly change where the cards in your deck are, based on the fact that taking a card from the deck and playing it changes the placement of all cards underneath it. I think I've explained enough, and if you don't get how this card works, I genuinely don't blame you. This is the card that single-handedly changes the game the most out of any card on this list, and for that, it's not something you can just smash into a deck and proceed to play. Quite the fun card to play, but it has an incredibly high learning curve that takes like 10 games to understand, let alone the 30 games to master. Worth the effort, but the effort is a lot to ask for, so it's staying here at the number 5, cleaning out the midsection of this list. Have you ever wanted to play against some of the most powerful bosses in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, but didn't want to make the deck accurate to a boring degree or build a deck at all? You can just play number 4 on this list, Boss Duel! Boss Duel deletes all cards from your deck that are not Boss Duel cards, which we will get to in a second. The idea behind this card is that you can go against 1, 2, or 3 players simultaneously with your boss deck, and usually the opponents would be playing real decks for the best results. The general idea is that regardless of whatever deck you choose, all of which have very few cards and are based on either Pegasus, Darkness, Zone, or Dawn 1000, you are allowed to the following buffs. During your standby phase, your entire graveyard goes straight into your hand. And yes, this is even more unfair considering the fact that cards can never be banished from your side of the field, or anywhere in your possession for that matter, and would just be destroyed if that would ever become an issue. You can normal summon an unlimited amount of times, and if an alternative win condition would ever be inflicted upon you, you would take 8,000 damage instead. I have no idea how this works with Exodia, but I assume it only triggers once for 8,000 and not continuously forever. Also, finally, since all of the decks only seem to have like 9 or 10 cards about anyway, you cannot lose by deck out under any circumstances. Which just means you can play out your entire deck's engine and everything you would ever want it to do forever. If this is broken to you, just know that playing with 3 players still ends up in wins for the boss sometimes. So that's the best way to do it, at least from the limited experience we have from this being a format played at some local game stores on Yu-Gi-Oh! Day, just like Command Duel. The 3 players get buffs as well, just to offset the crazy amount of damage every single boss deck can dish out. And they're pretty hilarious. Each opponent can only choose each option once per duel, and they are either doubling your monster's attack stats for one battle phase, adding a specific card to your hand instead of drawing during the draw phase, or making one player gain 4,000 life points. The last one's pretty interesting, as you can give the life points to one of your teammates if you feel like you're not going to help the team much more, or you've used all your other effects already. Playing this 1v1 makes for the only way to win being boss duel versus boss duel, and that's just fun in and of itself. Darkness seems to be the most busted in my experience, as his deck every single turn pops 3 cards, deals 3k damage, and makes one of his monsters gain 4k attack every single turn, because I guess we had to make that one a bit less clean, didn't we? But Zone can summon big beaters and burn for massive damage since they're all based on Time Lords anyway. So, it's up to you. Dawn 1000 and Pegasus are broke, but not on that level. Play at your own risk, and see what you can do. Sure, Duelist Kingdom is notorious for weird rules and plays, but people excuse it constantly as being the equivalent of Dungeons & Dragons, but both players are playing the Dungeon Master. Well, Battle City may just be the card to prove that this is the purest form of jank, and yes, the show does indeed not give a single care in the world for what the real-life game plays like. Battle City has a litany of rules, so let's go over them. Level 10 or higher monsters need 3 tributes to normal summon. Monsters special summoned from the extra deck need to be considered a number of tribute sacrifices equal to the number of summon materials needed to summon it. All spells are quick play during the battle phase, and set spells are quick play spells during your opponent's turn. MST does negate because destruction is also negation for spells and traps for some reason. Cards sent from the field to the graveyard are sent to the controller's graveyard, so stealing monsters is even more stupid. And if a monster attacks and the target is not there for whatever reason through a card effect, the attack is negated. Monsters cannot attack the turn they were special summoned from the extra deck, and divine monsters have to wait a turn to attack if they were summoned from the graveyard. If a monster is summoned just before the resolution of a single target effect, the summoning player can change the target to the summoned monster instead. If you thought that was already enough, whoo boy, let me tell you that there's an extra piece of consent that you must give to play with manga Battle City rules. And for some reason they're optional, even though the opponent has already said yes to Battle City itself. Manga rules state that, in addition to everything else we have already covered, monster cards cannot be set or flipped face down for any reason. Traps can be activated the turn they're set. The hand size limit is 7. You can have only 5 cards on your side of the field at any given time, and you can only use the effect of a spell or trap once per turn. Okay, so manga rules are a whole new level of jank that makes this somehow less understandable through a number of effects, including making Ojama Trio a broken staple, and pre-errata Temple of the Kings just being an inherent rule of the game. Alright. About the rest of the rules, it's basically what happened in the show, and this is a pretty wonderful translation of what Yugi, Kaiba, Merrick, Joey, and everyone else would do in the anime. The targeting and attack effects are just weird, but I can remember a few times where that was important. But the rest are just common mistakes that new players make because of the show, like the controller's grave clause and MST negating being an inherent rule. This is something you can smack into any deck and it just kind of works. Hopefully. Play this in anything and tell me some jank play is only possible in this game mode. I would love to hear it in the comment section down below. This is certainly a rule set that I play with from time to time, and transitioning from this to the real game will straight up make you a worse Yu-Gi-Oh player, like how playing Guitar Hero makes you worse at playing the guitar legitimately. Take that into account, and proceed to tribute for Obelisk with a 5-headed dragon. Go for it! Battle Packs were a wonderful product for new players, or players that just want to get a quick game in, and have $20 to burn for a new experience. Sealed Duel is a slightly inaccurate recreation of this effect, but crazy fun nonetheless. This card deletes your entire deck, and it's replaced with 9 battle packs of 5 cards a pop. And then you can delete cards to make your deck as low as 20 cards, but I usually stick with 40 so that the games aren't too weird or short, and I can play with some weird cards for the sake of fun. Both players have to agree on multiple other criteria before this point, however, like if there should be anime cards, if every monster should be treated as every monster type, and what sets the battle pack packs will come from. Never choose 3. It just has the worst cards comparatively, and you might as well be on an even playing field for this, getting Raigeki and Pot of Greed from Battle Pack 1 and all that. You're also allowed a mulligan to replace your hand once at the beginning of the duel, so that's neat too. Overall, very, very fun format with so much that could change that you might as well just play this forever. You'll never get the same game twice, and you'll also get to change different quirks about the individual rules to suit whatever you want. You'll get to play with band cards, fun jank, and even anime cards, which I may remind you, were not in battle packs because, well, then they'd be real cards, by definition. So I have no earthly ideas what cards are included in the anime pool, so try that at your own risk. I play this quite often, and it's even fun to play against the AI, as he's just down for anything you tell him. A format that's even fun single player? What could top that, I hear you asking, or rather thinking as you watch this video. Well, you see, what if we ramped it up even higher with Booster Draft Duel? Yep, second verse, same as the first, but first place goes to Booster Draft for a singular word in the card's name that I have always wanted to play in Yu-Gi-Oh! And this is the only really good way to do it. Draft! You only use Battle Pack 3, and I know I ragged on it literally like a minute ago, but it's a balanced draft set, and both of you are using it, so it's perfect. The way this draft works is the same as Magic the Gathering, where you open 3 packs to get to 15 cards, pick a card to go into your deck, and then pass the remaining 14 to your opponent, who does the same, passing back 13 to you. You do this until you have opened 9 packs, 3 at a time, and you keep 45 cards in your deck. More than 3 copies of a card is allowed, and all monsters are treated as all types in all locations. Simple, straightforward, and super fun to play. It really does become more about the deck building and player skill, more than who got the best cards. As if Daigusto Emerald isn't counted, the cards are almost all jank. At least, that's before you see that every type-specific card now applies to every monster, making what would be bad cards into useful cards to hold on to in this format. The best part about this, above every single other format, is that this is the most skill-intensive to play, considering both players are making do with what they have, and just trying to play more chess than modern-day Yu-Gi-Oh! Get your opponent right where you want them, using the knowledge of their deck you retained from the draft and noting what cards were gone, and then hard punish them. I love playing this with friends and seeing the most mundane plays being made into something shout-worthy. Play Booster Draft Duel the next chance you get. I know you won't regret it.